Hey guys, I want to talk about Apollo Boost. This is the new library out of Apollo, and I think this is super smart by them. They're now covering basically both audiences, the beginners and the more advanced users. So before they had a bunch of packages that let you really customize how your GraphQL client works. And now they've bundled it all together in Apollo Boost and put some really good defaults. So if you're just starting out, you can just install Apollo Boost, and this will work for, a majority of the cases, and they still let you configure it after that if you need to. And now you're not having to install a bunch of different packages if you're first starting out. So I think it's really nice. And they also add a few other goodies into Apollo Boost that we'll talk about in a second. Now you may also be wondering what is up with React Apollo. So this is the quick start for Apollo Boost. Why do you need to install React Apollo and Apollo Boost? Why didn't they put those together too? Well, Apollo actually works with more than just React, so that's the reason. They could have put it in Apollo Boost, but this Apollo Boost is like the core of Apollo. And then they want you to be able to install this for if you're using Angular, if you're using Vue, and then you'll install a new package for each one. So unlike Urkel, the package that we looked at yesterday, that one's specific to React, only works for React. And that's one of the things in the README. They say they specifically want to target React, whereas Apollo is, the core of it, and then they separate that out and have a React section. So that's important that they have this. You still need to install GraphQL, but I think that's fine. So let's take a look at what this looks like. So instead of grabbing things from Apollo preset, which they had before, you're pretty much just now going to grab it from Apollo Boost. And they also added a few other things in there, like Apollo or GraphQL tags, so you don't have to grab that. So now you can grab GQL from Apollo Boost instead of having to install GraphQL tag as well. But you'll notice this looks very similar to what you've seen before. You set up an Apollo provider, you add a client. Really the only difference is when you create this new Apollo client from Apollo Boost, you now only have to supply one thing, the URL to your GraphQL endpoint. You don't have to worry about setting up the cache or setting up a link, none of that stuff. You're just good to go with that. But you can always configure it, right, if you need to. And they added this new component in React Apollo. It's a query component. This is similar to the connect component from Urkel, where you just pass in your query. Now you do note you need to pass GQL in. It's not just passing a string in, but you now get a function with the loading error and data. And I think this makes a lot more sense than having a higher order component. Just you can kind of see where the parameters are coming from, right? Query is creating loading error and data. And you notice they changed a little bit how this works, right? They used to have loading and error inside this data parameter. They seem to have taken it out, which is kind of interesting, which I kind of like. That was actually a mistake I used to make a lot, is I would do it like this, and loading would be inside of data. And so they don't just have Apollo client inside of there, they also have Apollo link state, which is pretty nifty. So now you don't even need to install another package, and you have state management. No longer do you need to install Redux or MobX along with this. You're pretty much good to go. You install Apollo Boost, and that's pretty much you're fetching, getting your data from your API, and also any kind of state you need to handle. So Apollo Boost is looking really nice, and I'm glad they made this. And now, again, here's how you can configure it if you need to. So you can get into adding headers, right? So we've done this before, adding authentication headers. You do it in a slightly different way. You just have request parameter, and you can see that you now just change stuff in this Apollo client. So there's still all the amount of customization you can add, but now you add it to here. So when I was looking at this, one of the questions I had was, I saw a query component. Was there a mutation component? And I looked at the React Apollo and noticed they're still in beta for this. So don't use this in production yet, but it'll be coming soon, which is really nice. But I was like, they don't mention it in this blog post either. They just talk about the query component when they talk about the next version of React Apollo. But then I was looking at the issues for React Apollo, and it looked like there was a mutation component. So I was like, all right, maybe there is one, but they don't mention it anywhere. What's up with that? And finally, I just went into the code, and I saw in their source code they do export a mutation now and a query. So it looks like you can do it, and this looks like how the usage works. Now this guy's having an issue with it, so it might not be the best, but this gives you an idea of what it looks like. And this actually struck me as a little bit odd that they actually created a separate mutation component as opposed to from the query component. I guess that they are pretty different, and so separating that makes sense from components. The only thing that makes this interesting is now if you want to have, for example, a mutation and a query in the same component, you're now having to add 2, right? Because you have your mutation component, and then inside of that you'd have your query component. So you now have 2 components. Whereas before you could just use GraphQL and pass. I guess before you would create multiple higher order components for that as well. I'm also curious with this mutation if this handles more than one mutation. So I really liked with Urkel, I could just pass it multiple mutations and it would handle all of them at once instead of creating a new mutation for each one. So I really hope Apollo does that as well. Hard to tell so far if they're doing that or not. I'm going to wait a little bit till this gets out of beta to try it. That way they might change the API or how it works, especially with the mutation. But yeah, I'm excited about this release. I want to dig more into Apollo link state. I had a little trouble setting that up in the Prisma tutorial. I had ran into some bugs and stuff. I'm hoping those are ironed out, and I'm going to try that again because I think that has a lot of potential. And yeah, also try out Apollo Boost because it looks pretty sweet. And by the way, Apollo Boost works. You don't have to use the new query and mutation components quite yet if you don't want to. You can just use it with the GraphQL higher order component too. So that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you soon.